Welcome to the podcast for advocacy, particularly for advocacy for health promotion. The first question we need to ask ourselves, what does this term advocacy mean? Now, advocacy is a political process. It's where an individual or group aims to influence policy or potentially resource allocation, decisions within politics, whether they be economic, social systems, or the way institutions run. So anytime a person wants to influence any of those particular processes, that would be known as advocacy. It can include many activities that a person or an organisation can undertake, such as media campaigns, public addresses and speeches, commissioning, public research, or conducting a poll. Now, when we look at the term health advocacy, we're dealing with very much the same thing, but it mainly encompasses direct services to the individual or family, as well as activities that promote health or access to healthcare. Generally, when we look at health advocacy, it can be to serve the wider community, so the larger public community, or it could be for a specific group. Advocates support and promote the rights of patients in healthcare arenas, as well as help building capacity to improve community health and enhance healthy policy initiatives focused on available, safe and quality care.
What is advocacy? What is advocacy? What is advocacy?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
It's scary.
No idea.
I don't know.
Advocacy.
Advocacy?
Advocacy.
What is advocacy? That's not a fair question.
I don't know.
Why are you asking this question?
The ability to go and choose what it is that you want to do.
Advocacy is when you're advocating for something.
Speaking out on behalf of an issue or a group of people.
How did you know that?
I kind of made it up.
Advocacy is about caring. Advocacy is about caring enough for the people that you're working with that you will stand up and speak up on their behalf.
I think being there and speaking out for people who can't do it themselves.
It's a commitment to change unjust social policies and to use all of your own personal resources, intellectual and physical and financial, to create change where it morally should be happening.
I think advocacy is really kind of the logical outcome of making grant making after a while. It's not so much taking care of people who are victims or are dealing with the circumstances. It's how do you change the things that create those circumstances. And so I think advocacy is really that sort of that higher level of changing the way things operate.
It's one of the strategies and steps that people can use to tell their story, to be heard in the legislature or in the community, to share an issue that they're involved in, and perhaps educate people about that issue in a way that they maybe have not been exposed to before.
What is something you've done in the name of advocacy?
Well, my colleague Karen Ulick and I got arrested for civil disobedience some years ago when we stood in front of a great big bulldozer that was about to plow under a homeless encampment in the Santa Cruz riverbed. We felt that was wrong, so we did what I would think anybody would do. We just said no.
Nonprofits and nonprofit advocacy is really about democracy at its core. It's about giving a platform for citizens to step forward and say, we want to breathe life into what Abraham Lincoln said, government of, by, and for the people. We can't do it as an individual. The world's too big, but we can combine and come together to join forces to make a difference and have our voices heard.
Now, it is important when we do look at advocacy, we do define some of the specific terms. So, advocacy itself, by definition, is an active support of an idea or a cause, in particular, the act of pleading or arguing for something. So, it could be the act of arguing in favour of or the practice of supporting someone to make their voice heard. Generally, when we advocate in support of somebody, it is somebody who is marginalised or suffering from inequity. The term lobbying, by definition, is a focused form of advocacy, and it particularly aims to shape public policy. Now, lobbying generally means persuading individuals or groups, particularly people with decision-making power, to support your cause. So why advocate? Why is it necessary? Why are we learning about it in health studies? The first reason is it's essential in civil society as a tool. It is a way for the society to be empowered, for everybody's voice to be heard, and to increase participation. What it does do is it ensures that the agenda or injustice is actually tabled, and it makes sure that some of these different types of initiatives are actually actioned and integrated into public policy. Now, an example of advocacy could be to lobby or to advocate on behalf of the Sustainable Development Goals to ensure that they are part legally of the Australian health policy. So how do we advocate? Now, the most important thing is we firstly need to understand that for it to be effective, advocacy needs to be systematically planned. So there does need to be a process, there does need to be a plan in place in order to make sure that it is effective and that we are pushing the agenda. We will look at a cycle of advocacy a little bit later in the slides. It generally can be as a reaction to an event or an issue. So quite often we do see a large amount of media hype or media campaigns which are advocating for a particular side, a particular viewpoint, or a particular issue directly after something has occurred. Now, a really good example would be in America as we speak, with the huge prevalence and huge incidence of fatal shootings and mass murders due to guns. What they're currently calling for in the media and through campaigns and advocacy is for tighter gun laws in the United States of America. Advocacy could also be a plan as a precursor of a later intervention as well. All right, there are some critical factors for success that we need to understand and establish before advocacy can take place. Now, we do need to make sure we're clear about the issue, we're clear about our facts and our position. Now, there's no good trying to stand up for somebody or try to advocate for an issue which we're not conversed in, which we don't know all of the information about. If we do choose to use lobbying as one of our strategies, it is important that we only use it for the issues of the highest priority. Now, to be able to understand or define priority, it is important that we do use a behavioural matrix. We could find that out also through the implication or the application of a needs assessment. We need to be careful in that case, and it's another reason for a needs assessment to take place, is that we need to ensure we're not speaking on behalf of people. So we do need to actively consult with people to ensure that if we are sticking up for them, if we are advocating for them, that we have their interests and their priorities at heart and we are addressing their needs. We need to target the right people. So we do need to analyse who has power, who is a decision maker, who can try to influence the changes that we're seeking. We can also try to build a lobbying group. Now, generally, in terms of health, in terms of behaviour and creating norms, we can work on this idea of strength in numbers. At the same time, as we've seen in previous cases and looking at other health initiatives, when we do pool and network and create partnerships, we also have better allocation of resources, also better reach in the community. All right, some more important definitions that we do need to clear up before we continue any further. The term public health, which we will use quite often, is any type of organised response by society to protect and promote health and to prevent illness, injury and disability. So an example of public health in Australia might be the way we set up our public hospital system. It could be our Medicare system. Now, public health advocacy is obviously sticking up or arguing on behalf of somebody, but it's a method of removing or overcoming any structural barriers which might prevent any public health goals or might prevent any inequities being addressed. And finally, public policy. We've spoken about policy, we've looked at healthy public policies, so it is important that we define it. The term public policy is the combination of rules, laws, goals, and funding priorities set by public officials. Now, this will determine how the government meets needs, how they choose to solve problems, and how they choose to solve public funds. So, public policy, to put it simply, is our goals, but they are set in law. Okay, so any time that we seek to do something, it becomes, if it's a policy, it actually becomes set in law. So when we do go to advocate, it is important that we do understand the advocacy cycle. So the first thing we need to do is we need to identify what are the issues that we're looking to change. Once we've done that, we can start to gather our evidence and gather our data and facts, because as we know, it is vital for the effective advocacy to take place. We do need to be well versed in our subject matter. You then need to find out about your audience, so knowing your audience. That might be going through consultation with the specific population to ensure that you're meeting their needs. You might also be implementing a needs assessment, which will allow you to fundamentally figure out what priorities they have for their health issues, whether it is amenable to change, whether they're willing to actually make any changes. We can then set goals for our actual advocacy campaign. Okay, that will actually be coming up with a predetermined set of criteria as to what you want to achieve, and that can be then used to map or manage any progress. From there, we can actually develop a clear message. So what are we trying to raise awareness about? What specifically are we trying to change? What sort of information are we trying to get out to the population? From there, we can try to build support. Now, I'm not going to go into that too much because we're going to look at the next few slides and how we build support and the different methods to be able to do that. From there, we do need to develop an action plan. So once we've come up with our methods, what is our step-by-step process which is required to be able to ensure that we are most effective, we're allocating resources, we're managing time, and that we're actually going to be able to meet our goals. The final step is to evaluate and learn. Now, most advocacy can take extended periods of time. Some advocacy can be very effective very quickly. It is important that if your advocacy campaign hasn't seen momentum, it hasn't seen change, it is important to evaluate to see what might need to be changed or what we might need to address in future advocacy campaigns. All right, so how do we advocate? So these are different methods, different ways, so we can try to just purely raise awareness. We can research to get to know the causes or the reasons why particular issues occur. We can hold events and campaigns. We can hold press conferences or even debates. We could notify the media or send press releases or invite them to particular events to get maximal exposure. We could write to influence politicians or to allude to particular issues which you think they need to look at. We could include the people who you are advocating for in our process, so active consultation. We do need to set goals, and we need to use a variety of communication techniques. So with the the increase in social media, we now have many avenues that we can use to get the message. Okay, so a common waste style question. You're going to be asked to identify and discuss different strategies that you can use to conduct an advocacy campaign or an advocacy promotion. So the strategies that you will need to use are as follows. It could be framing the issue, mobilizing groups, the use of a champion or champions, influencing policy, lobbying, raising awareness, developing partnerships, creating debate, and building capacity. Now, what really is important to understand and to know is there has been an extra 4 different strategies added to the course and the syllabus in 2016. So if there are any waste questions which speaks about discuss the 5 strategies, obviously you could choose 5 strategies, but it is something you need to be aware of because there has been that increase. All right, so the first strategy for advocacy is framing the issue. What that means is we are going to present the issue using techniques and in a way that elicits a particular or a desired response. Now, generally, we'll present it as either a loss or a gain, and people will react differently depending whether we actually are looking at it from a positive or a negative standpoint. So, for example, we could talk about reducing road trauma versus increasing life expectancy by fixing the risk factors. Now, depending on which way we look at it, and depending on what our advocacy strategy is, one may have greater impact than the other. Most health advocacy will try to positively frame an issue as it attracts more followers. Framing polls might also be an option to induce a desired response, such as a question like, do you think Indigenous Australians should have something, such as increased life expectancy? By actually framing it in a positive way or putting it in the pro script, you're actually inducing more of a positive response from the population. It can also refer to the practice of emphasizing specific facts, values, or other considerations which might prompt particular definitions, interpretations, or evaluations and recommendations to come up. What we mean by that is we might choose to look at some specific sets of data, or we might choose to exclude other sets of data which might not support our cause as readily. All right, the second strategy is mobilizing groups. So as a rule, we are looking at this idea of strength in numbers. As we know, the more people we have following a particular behavior, whether that behavior be positive or negative, we do see that idea of a norm being developed. So mobilizing groups is all about organizing and encouraging people to act in a certain way to bring about a particular objective. Whether that be just all demonstrating positive health behaviors, or whether it be to meet in a march or a rally, they are both examples of mobilizing groups. Now, generally, mobilizing groups aids lobbying, which is another strategy, as that idea of power and numbers comes into it again in influencing those decision makers. All right, the third strategy is the idea of using a champion. So a champion is used to support a cause and raise the profile of the issue. Generally, a champion will be somebody who is held up and valued highly in popular culture, and generally will act as an authority figure over the population. And as we know, authority figures have the ability to externally generated beliefs due to that power over the population. Now, the champion could serve as a public ambassador for the cause. It could just be used to raise extra awareness. Now, as we can see here, we may be unaware of who this person is in the picture, but this is actually a picture of a ex-Wallaby and current Western Force player who is actually has cystic fibrosis.
When the Force faced the Stormers in round 8 of last year's Super 14, a young 21-year-old Australian hooker came off the bench to make his senior debut. It marked the latest chapter in the quite remarkable story of Nathan Charles.
Well, I grew up in the inner west of Sydney, so league, that was really dominated by league. So I used to play league growing up on a Friday and rugby union on a Saturday and a Sunday. Coming from a union background with my dad and my brothers both playing, my uncle still plays Golden Oldies, so I just like to get out there and play footy, whatever code, and just get out there and have fun.
But Charles isn't your average youngster trying to make his way to the top. He's achieved his goals in the shadow of a life-threatening condition for which there is no known cure.
Cystic fibrosis is the most common genetic condition in Australia. It basically affects the lungs and the digestive system. By the looks of me, obviously I don't have a problem with digestion, but I eat plenty. But mostly it affects me with the lungs. It just creates an extra sort of mucus in the lungs and clogs up the airways a bit, but fortunately I look after myself, keep myself in tip-top shape so it doesn't affect my on-field performance.
Yeah, like anyone that overcomes adversity, you really admire it. Nathan, with his cystic fibrosis, initially I think kept it quiet because possibly a little embarrassed about it, didn't want people to think that would hold him back, but since he's come out and made us aware of it and that, I think the kid has blossomed.
I find being in an environment like this, I'm always active, I'm always healthy in that sense. So the more exercise I do, the healthier I find I am. So definitely not a hindrance. The lifestyle I live now probably helps my health.
It's the first time I've ever treated a patient with cystic fibrosis who's an elite athlete. I've always treated cystic fibrosis patients in the emergency department from their lung infections and lung conditions, so Nathan was certainly a challenge. We sat down and had a lot of discussions at the beginning to try and work out how we were going to cope with the condition.
Constant treatments involve just going to a clinic and getting tests done, breathing tests, blood tests, whatever, just to make sure I don't have any bugs, I haven't picked up anything. And then just on top of that, just taking medications. I probably take up to 10 tablets a day or 15 tablets a day, just medications and vitamins, just to make sure I do keep healthy.
Charles was called into the Wallabies training squad ahead of their end-of-year tour to the Northern Hemisphere, and he's using his high profile to help raise awareness of the disease through his work with the Cystic Fibrosis Australia organisation.
Well, I was actually asked to take on the National Ambassador role 2 years ago, but I didn't feel I was in a position to make a difference, and I didn't feel I was actually ready to talk about it publicly. And sort of over those 2 years, I've had a chance to mull that over, and I've kind of stepped into a professional environment, and I've sort of made it there on my own accord. So now I feel as though it's time to get that out there and let other people know exactly what it is, and people that are affected by it, that they can achieve. So not to just sit back and let cystic fibrosis control their life, but they can actually control the cystic fibrosis.
Charles is currently the world's only professional rugby player afflicted by the condition. He wastes little time worrying about the long-term future and what might lie ahead. He is, quite simply, a rugby player who happens to have cystic fibrosis, which, like any other problem, is an everyday challenge to be overcome.
I think in the last 10 years, the life expectancy has gone up about from 27 to 37. So, with research and a couple of studies I've been a part of, hopefully, doctors and researchers can find something to make that go longer. But I don't see that as a barrier for myself, and I hope other people don't see that as a barrier for them either. The thing I like to live by is just believe you can do anything because you can. The only thing stopping you is yourself. It might be a bit of a cliched quote, but it's something I truly believe in. The only person that can stop you doing something is yourself. So if you can overcome that barrier, I believe you can achieve anything. I want to make a final series with the Western Force and hopefully take that all the way and win a championship. Also want to play for the Wallabies. That's a long-term prospect. So I'll just keep pressing my case both here and in Australian rugby. Everyone's got their own problems in life, and this is mine. So I'm going to, like I said, tackle it head on and do as much as I possibly can.
What we can also see as another example is in the form of Hugh Jackman supporting the Are You OK Day.
Hi, I'm Hugh Jackman, and I'd like to invite you to be part of the Are You OK Day. So on Are You OK Day, just take a moment
policies. So
to
as we've
think
seen
about
through our
your work
extensive
colleagues,
look at Ottawa
maybe
Charter,
a friend,
we can try
maybe
to
a family
build
member
healthy public
who's
policy,
just struggling a little bit, just may need some
whereby
help.
we can try to
Or maybe you're not sure, or
policymakers
don't just sit there thinking, I think they're probably okay. Take a moment, pull them aside, grab
some of the
a
policies
coffee,
and
tea,
the
whatever it
ideas
is.
could be
Just say,
any
hey,
policy that protects
okay?
the
Everything good?
population or a
On
specific
Thursday, October
population
7th,
from health
who will you
issues.
ask?
It could
Join us
be
for Are You
to
OK Day?
encourage positive health behaviours or potentially outlaw or reduce the effects of negative health behaviours. We could also try to limit or restrict the sale or access to harmful products and services, or potentially try to increase the availability and the access to positive health. So through influencing policy, we can actually see an increase in overall health status. All right, our next strategy is lobbying. So we've already looked at it and we know that it is a focused form of advocacy. And what it aims to do is shape public policy. What it actually tries to do, it tries to actually shape the policy at either a local, a national, or a global level. Lobbying can alter the legislative process and possibly sway policy to become healthier and more supportive of the needs of the actual population. So lobbying in its term, as we know, means persuading government representatives to support your position. It involves giving views and information to decision makers, but ultimately lobbying is about influencing decision makers to change policy or to change the structure of society to ensure that we seek and have better health benefits. Another strategy is raising awareness. So increasing people's knowledge or their perception of a situation. This can include educational programs, increasing health literacy, changing to beliefs, values and attitudes in regards to the particular situation. Raising awareness involves disseminating information so the public can actively engage in discussion and increase the knowledge base regarding the topic. This could be done really, really well in nowadays with contemporary technology such as social media, as it's common to raise awareness through that structure and that platform. A really good example which we saw a few years ago was the Ice Bucket Challenge, where we actually had people actively engaging from the population and increasing their actual participation, empowerment of the actual program and the promotion. The next strategy is developing partnerships. So when we're advocating, it's important to target organizations or agencies and companies that already support the advocacy goal that you're intending to support as well. Creating partnerships with other like-minded people will increase effectiveness and the strength of the advocacy efforts. Part of this reason can be due to increased resources, increased mobilizing of groups. It could also be due to an increased awareness and raising of awareness due to the increased population that's actually being targeted. There's two types of partnerships. You can either partner with other advocacy groups, or you could partner with groups that share the same advocacy goals. Our next strategy is creating debate. So debate is any form of formal discussion about a particular topic. They're usually held in public forums, so things like the media and parliament, and it involves opposing arguments, views, and points of view being put forward. Generally, debates will result in an agreed upon resolution through vote or judgments made by the audience. However, not all debates end in resolution. Some form more of an awareness raising platform where both sides are able to put out their points of view and their structure. Controversial ethical issues are generally best advocated for by creating debate due to the fact that both sides are able to share their viewpoints. Okay, our final strategy that we're required to look at is building capacity. So as we know, when we look at capacity, we're talking about an individual's knowledge, skills, and abilities to be able to make healthy decisions. So the development and strengthening of human and institutional resources. Previously, when we've looked at building capacity, we've looked at an individual. When we're dealing with advocacy, capacity can be based not only on just individual humans, but also on an entire institution. So particular or examples of human resources might be taking on more staff or volunteers, or the staff could work more efficiently or in a more focused manner to get better structure or better awareness. From an institutional resource standpoint, we could try to increase funding, we could have more time allocated to a particular goal, or we could improve our policy or communication systems. As a bit of an example, it'd be a really good idea to read page 57, which looks at an advocacy which has been done quite well in the form of organ donation. And what you should look at is what types of strategies were used in this particular advocacy campaign.